tips to help you get into the game. 1. Learn your lines.
Mrs. Crackit, Mrs. Clockit, Mrs. Blackett.
Crackit here, Crackit.
Number 2. Get along with your co-stars.
Lovely things. Oh! You know the song you gave me on the very first anniversary of
Number 3. Remember when you should enter the scene.
There should be an arm coming through the window even before Fred is off. Here it comes.
Hey, boss, that burglar alarms, they ought to be prosecuted for
All right,
incitement.
Selsdon, hold it. Let's take it again.
That makes me want to sit down and weep.
Hold
when I
it,
think I used to do
Selsdon,
bad, and I
hold
never
it.
thought
And of course, most important of all, number 4. Take the critiques of your director to heart. After all, he's here just trying to get the most out of you and your performance.
Round our ankles. Right, that's the line, Brooklove. We know you've worked over in London in some very classy places where they let you make the play up as you go along. But we don't want that kind of thing here, love. Not when the author has provided us with such a considered and polished line of his own. Not at 1 o'clock in the morning. Not 2 lines away from the end of Act 1. Not when we're just about to get a coffee break before we all drop dead from exhaustion. We merely want to hear the line, "What's that death?" That's all. Nothing else! I'm not being unreasonable, am I? Exit? Does it say exit?
Learn these tips well and take them to heart. They will set you up for success. Meanwhile, let's check out Noises Off today on the SuperCaZt.
And welcome back to the SuperCaZt. I'm your host, the man who put the super in the SuperCaZt, the Super Foch. And as always, I'm joined by my good buddy and partner,
Steve Z, the man who put the Z in SuperCaZt.
and boy, do we have a treat for you guys. This is a film that I'm sure some people will know this film. Some people won't. Some people will relate to this film and some people won't. And it is, of course, as you already know, because you clicked on it, and we thank you for that, Noises Off. It is a film about a play, and it's got a great cast. I think we gotta say that in the first thing. From the director, from the guy that plays the director, Mr. Michael Caine, Sir Michael Caine, I do apologize. On down. What do you think of this film, man?
Well, I think I'm glad we're talking about it just because this is one that I think it's kind of like fallen out of just the conversation totally because it's a random 90s comedy, early 90s comedy that didn't get a lot of, I mean, I remember it coming on cable some, but it wasn't like your frequent player all the time. It just like occasionally, I remember seeing it on like WGN or something. And then like right now in my hand, this is a DVD. It hasn't been released on Blu-ray, 4K, anything. Mainly because it's owned by Disney, but that's a different story for a different day. But I think this movie, it kind of struck me in an interesting way. Like, and I'm going to use a sort of a play reference as I talk about it because I think it's very fitting. But this film, I remember watching it long time ago. I don't remember much about that experience just because I think I was probably really sleepy at your house or something. But we watched it. But this time watching it, I was into it. I think this film is very engaging. I think that you have to pay attention to it because it's giving out so much information every scene, and all the jokes are kind of linked together and stuff like that. So I think it's engaging. So I was engaged, but I didn't really like it until the very last scene, and then I was just like, oh, I really like this. And, and the reason why I'm relating that to drama story is because I also took a class in college called Dramatic Theory. And there was a play in there that I read. It's called The Cherry Orchard by Anton Chekhov. But I hated that play until the very last scene. And then I realized this is one of the best things I've ever read. It just kind of clicked. And I'm not going to say this is one of the best movies I've ever seen, but I will say I understood what the film was going for. I understood how this is an interesting experience, it's almost like a sort of an experiment in film at times. So I appreciate from that aspect. I also appreciate the whole putting on a show sort of aspect to it, and sort of the difficulties that can arise to that. Yeah. Obviously, it's a very entertaining film, very funny, great cast, like you said. There's a lot here to kind of bring you in, and the question is, will you stay and continue to be engaged? We'll see.
That's up to you.
I think that's personal taste, but I definitely was, and I'm glad I watched it again in prep for this show, because now I actually have something good to say about it.
No, I leave the sardines. No, I take the sardines.
You leave the sardines and you hang up the phone.
Yes, right. I hang up the phone.
And you leave the sardines.
I leave the sardines.
You leave the sardines.
I hang up the phone and I leave the sardines.
Right.
We've changed that, have we, dear?
No, dear.
That's what I've always been doing?
I wouldn't say that, Dottie, my precious.
Yeah, this is a movie that, much like you, I remember watching this film on like a Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon cable, and being interested in it, because even at a younger age, I had always been interested in the theater. Of course, I got into theater in college and that sort of thing. So I want to dedicate this episode to anybody that I ever acted with, by the way. Whether that be Bevel State Community College theater, the Pastime Theater here in Winfield, where I live now, or just anywhere else, high school. So I want to dedicate the show to that, because if this movie does anything really well, it really shows what it's like to put on a production. Because it's one thing to do, a scene and act and all this kind of thing, but you got to do cues, you got to do lighting. I mean, there's so many things that go into a theater production, and watching this film brings back so many memories. And in fact, today I was talking about the first musical I got to do at our beloved Coleman High School, and that was, of course, Annie Get Your Gun, and how huge of a show that was. And so watching this film brings back all those memories, and I just love the cast. You mentioned the cast, and I think that is one of the things that makes this movie great, is the director onto this great cast that he has to direct, even though he's not a fan of any of these people by the end of this film. I don't think.
Yeah, and I guess this what's pretty unique about this film is how it's just kind of structured. And like I said, it's sort of an experimental film in a way. It's by Peter Bogdanovich, who I haven't seen a ton of his films. Right. I know The Last Picture Show is the most famous. This comes sort of like toward the end of his career, but I know it was a passion project of sorts for him, because he was around a lot of actors and stuff growing up, and originally he was a film critic, so he kind of like coming from that angle too.
Right.
But it's a neat film because it's basically like a 3 sort of act thing.
It is.
At the beginning of the film, we see just Michael Caine as Lloyd, the director, and he's sitting down with this cast, prepping for the night before the premiere in Des Moines, Iowa, and nothing is going right. Nobody knows their lines. Nobody knows where to put the sardines. Nobody knows what door they're going in, what door they're coming out of. And this play is not a good play, mind you. And these actors, I would say they're not the worst of the worst, but they all have their little quirks,
Exactly.
Some of them, and we'll get into that in a second. They are very unique sort of ensemble. But that's how the first part is, just how are we going to get the play going. And I think they're trying to like set up things later. They want you to kind of see how this play actually is supposed to go.
Exactly.
And because from then on, it actually gets worse. Every performance we see, it gets worse. Second performance, we're seeing the chaos behind the scene because people have slept around with other people, and some stuff has been mistaken for others, and it's just madness. And I like that scene because it's very much like a callback to the old like silent films, because it's basically a lot of stuff going on and nobody's talking because they can't talk because they're backstage. They don't want to. Noises are off, hence the name of the movie. And I think really that's probably if I had to guess the origin of this film or the origin of this play, whatever it was to begin, I think it was just that. Somebody was like, you know what, let's have a movie or a play where they just don't say anything for a long period of time. They're kind of like acting this stuff out. And from there, we get our third one, which is my favorite of all because everything just hits the wall, everything goes nuts, and everybody just has to start ad-libbing. And they're not really good at ad-libbing, most of them. It's chaos, it's funny to watch, and it's just a good time to be had. But I guess what makes it worth having is this ensemble cast. So who do you want to start with, man?
Michael Caine, this plays the director. Of course, Carol Burnett, Julie Haggerty. Denham Elliott might be my favorite character in this entire movie. He is hilarious. Christopher Reeve is like, you wouldn't really think, oh man, this guy's Superman. He doesn't have comedic chops. No, this guy brings his comedic chops. John Ritter, I mean, take your pick. What about you, man? When you think of this movie, who is the character or performance that sticks out for you, man?
I guess I gotta start with the big man, Michael Caine, just because he's the guy that we're seeing most of this come through. He's supposed to be, I guess, the protagonist, but at the same time, I find him like probably the least likable character. I was talking to you before we started recording. I was like, I really did not like him. I did not like how he treated everybody, and I know he's supposed to be stressed, but he comes across as very just sort of selfish and just, I don't know. He could do a little bit more as a director to try to communicate in different ways. And I do think he is sort of the glue that holds everything together. That third part where everything's going kind of crazy, he has to kind of tell them what to do and kind of pull them together. But I think the performance just from him, though, I think it's great because I always forget how cool Michael Caine was back in the day. Because we're so accustomed to just seeing old man Michael Caine now. He's like, oh, I'm gonna look for you in the movie, But he was so cool. Like he was so funny, and I think this film is sort of like one of the last films that kind of captures that aspect of his career, and I think he's great at that.
Hold it, Freddie. What's the trouble?
Lloyd, you know how stupid I am about moves. Sorry, Gary. Sorry, Brooke. It's just my usual dimness. But why do I take the things into the study? Wouldn't it be more natural if I left them on stage?
No.
I just thought it might be more logical somehow.
No.
Lloyd, I know it's rather late in the day to go into all this, but...
No, Freddie, we've got several more minutes left before we open.
Well, thank you, Lloyd. As long as we're not too rushed.
But other than him, I think just all the little quirky people, probably Christopher Reeve is probably the quirkiest in my opinion, just because... His character, I want to say he's on the spectrum or something. He has a hard time understanding his character's motivations. Yeah, he's like, why would I do that? Why would I just carry the sardine plates with me? And he's questioning all this stuff, and he doesn't need to because part of the play is you're not supposed to question it.
Exactly.
But he's looking for some deep psychological.
He's got to know exactly. He's got to know every motivation for everything he does, and I find that interesting about his character for sure. Like you said, he might be on the spectrum. He might just be really into whatever he's doing. I don't know, but I totally agree with you. I think that there's so many good performances, and I think almost every character has kind of their little thing that they do as far as, that's their thing. And so, I think it's a really good ensemble that just shows. And I've never been in a show that has just completely fallen apart. Thank God. I mean, that's the nightmare of actors, especially stage actors, because you don't get, this is your one shot. You got to do it or you don't. And I've been in plays where people have forgotten lines. I've been in plays where I've forgotten lines. So it does happen. But this is a nightmare scenario where everything just goes awry by the end of it. And it's funny in a sense, but then it's also nails on a chalkboard in a sense, because it's just like, oh, that'd be so terrible to have to deal with. You know, it's so fun. And then the fact that this is a professional company. This, like we said, this is their job. So they've got these attitudes, or some of them have these attitudes that they're better than other people. So you got all this going on, and it's just it's a disaster movie in a sense.
Yeah, and I think that's what the comedy comes from, is this is mishap. This is not going right.
No.
And I think they set that up with sort of the cast, and
exactly.
Once you get to know sort of who's what, and sort of what their flaws are, or what sort of their inclinations are as people.
Yeah.
And especially once we learn about sort of the behind the scenes stuff, where you're like, oh, this person is an item with this person, but maybe be seeing this person, or they seem to have chemistry with this person. And I think that's kind of common with like actors behind the stage. I think there is some of that, because they're kind of like a family. Like, we're all actors, we're family. Yeah. We're hanging out backstage between, like, because I mean, while this person's rehearsing the scene, we're over here just hanging out, you know.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie and all that, and I think they get this, especially these people. They're going on doing this for days and days.
Right.
But going back to my point, like, you kind of are introduced to that Selsden is this old senile man that can't hear and barely knows he knows his lines. I'll give him that. But as far as delivering them in a believable way, that's a different thing. And coming in on time and all that, different sort of thing too.
Yep.
But we know that, and then we just see sort of how this just derails and see the chaos. And that part too, like I said, you said it's your favorite part. It's growing on me. I really like how it starts off with Julie Haggerty's character, Poppy, who I think she's the MVP of this whole production, personally.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Caine's character, Lloyd, he's the director, but he kind of just abandons them for shows.
Yeah.
Like, he takes off for weeks, works on something else. But Poppy, she starts off this scene. She's saying, okay, we got 3 minutes till on stage.
Yep.
And it just picks up from there, because the actors aren't talking to each other. They're fighting.
Yep. And
then we get to see what happens behind the scene as they're basically acting like little children. And I love how that whole thing starts off. It's like, you think they might pull it together. Freddie has his speech. He's like, okay, guys, we got a show to do. Let's all be professionals here. And then they just kind of like look at him and it's like, okay, whatever. You're stupid. Yeah. And
exactly.
It just, they turn into like, I don't know, it's like Three Stooges. It's like Looney Tunes. It's really funny.
Oh, they're not something you created, are they?
I never should have touched it.
No, they're lovely.
Stick it down. Put it back. Never saw it.
Well, I'll just throw them in the attic and pack them away with all the other things you gave me that are too precious.
All right.
What do you think? What's your thoughts on that part?
Look, it's like you just said. It's the worst situation you could be in, because by the end of it, they're not talking, they're not getting along. Everybody is just sick of everybody else, for most people. And then you have people like Selsden, who is just barely there mentally, you know. So it's a disaster movie, and it's the worst situation. And, you know, I remember watching this film at some point when I was still doing plays, and it really affecting me a whole lot more than it did now. Like, now that I haven't done plays in a while, like, I can remember things, and you know, I never had to experience anything like this in, you know, any of the shows, but you do miss stuff sometimes, and you do miss cues or you're late or whatever. So things happen, but like I said, this is just the worst possible situation, and thank God I never had to experience anything like this. But the performances in this movie, you know, you see these characters and you're like, I think I think a lot of people be like, well, this is just made up. This is, these people don't act like this. No, it's pretty close. I think, you got these personalities that are sometimes are a little bit haughty, sometimes are a little bit, I'm better than you kind of thing, and that can be a danger. But like I said, I never did a professional play, so I don't know what that's like. And after watching this film, I'm kind of like glad I didn't, because this would be my fear, is that everybody would hate everybody by the end of it. And so
that actually reminded me of a question I was going to ask you.
Sure.
Who do you think's the biggest diva on this set?
Oh my
Because
God.
we got a lot of because I think John Ritter's Gary, he could be one. Carol Burnett's Dottie, she seems like she might fit the bill. They're just all very temperamental and kind of showboats. Which
honestly,
one do you think?
I think it would be depend on the day. You could probably just pick I think they're all pretty much except Christopher Reeve's character. I think he's still a pretty good person at heart. Like, I think he's still trying to be like, hey guys, let's keep this together, So I think he's all right. Selznick, I think he's just too senile for, he's probably good at heart. Of course, Poppy is probably the most noble at heart,
Yeah, but she's not an actor. She's not supposed to actually be in the play. She's
exactly.
Just like, even though she
but
does
then
get
she
brought
even
in
gets
several
dragged
times.
into it.
Yeah.
So
she has to be the chic in the final scene.
I mean, like I said, it seems like it would be an exaggeration for something like this to happen. But, and again, not experiencing something like this exactly, I can see it almost happening. Like, I could see this kind of thing happening. So it's not a complete farce, obviously, but there's just so many good performances, and even if you've never been in a play, I think it's cool for people to see this because, again, you have backstage stuff happen, like I said, but hopefully not this bad. But I do love the performances, and I love that you get to see the backstage married to the front, and you kind of see how that is supposed to come together or fall completely apart,
Yeah, I guess that's a big thing too. It shows you the whole collaborative nature of this. It's like, you could have one really good actor, one really good performance.
Yeah.
But, I mean, hey, if this person that's supposed to fix the doors, if they don't do their job, or if this person's got too much on their plate that they can't do this correctly,
right,
it could spell disaster. And that's really what happens that third time through, man. Oh my gosh, that's just so funny where they just have to make it up on the spot.
It's a completely different show. I think it's a completely different show by then. And that's the funny thing because, like, I know from my experience, a lot of the shows, I ended up pretty much memorizing the entire show by the end of it. Like, I could have done a one-man show pretty much by the end of it. And so for them to forget their lines and stuff and just make up stuff, I mean, that's kind of crazy. But again, like I said, it's not too far off from certain situations that I've been in. But it's a disaster movie for the most part that I would hate to be a part of. But I love every performance in this. I think everybody does a good job of presenting these characters, and the fact that they've all got their kind of attitudes or their quirks or whatever. So it's a really entertaining film that I think deserves a lot more praise than it gets. That's the thing with me. And again, I know that I'm kind of partial to it, but what about you, man? Do you feel like it deserves more praise now that you've kind of watched it and studied it a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. Just because it's an interesting film, and I think for what it set out to do, I think it accomplishes it. I found this awesome quote by the director, Peter Bogdanovich. He says, basically he was talking about sort of like his goal with it, and it says the intention was to get the audience on a kind of a ride and not stop.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it is. It's like you get sucked into this film, and you just kind of going for the for the ride. I mean, like first you're just trying to get used to what's going on. Like you just get plopped into it. You're trying to get to know these characters. They're not really introduced, but at the same time we're trying to watch how this play works, trying to get to know the rules of that. And then from there we're watching this one part where basically we're watching a story happen behind the scene.
Yeah,
that's spoken with no dialogue. So I think he does a very good job of like pulling us in and making us part of that. And I don't think that's totally easy. I think he's able to do that because he shoots it like a play.
Yeah, exactly.
It's, and I imagine the actors that I know a lot of them do have stage backgrounds and improv backgrounds.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as an actor working in this movie, this is difficult because these are long takes. These are a lot of times where you have to like basically stay in character and stay with it. So I think it's a very good film to admire from that standpoint, because that's what I'm into a lot with a film like this. Because I'm not an actor or anything like that. I've done a few shows, as in like one show I did, I thought it was going to be a disaster, and then all of a sudden night one is like, oh, that was great, man, what the heck.
And look,
so it was kind of the opposite of this. This one just seemed like, oh man, this is just getting worse and worse each time.
I've had that experience for a couple shows, and that's the thing is you're like, oh my gosh, we're never gonna get through this show. It's gonna just be a complete disaster. And then opening night comes, and boom, we're good. And the thing I think that's interesting about this show is, you know, like in sports movies, where it's like the team gets gradually better, and then they win the big game or whatever at the end of it. And you think this movie is going to get there too. You're like, oh, they're gonna get it together, and it's going to be great by the end of it. No, they never get that. It just gets progressively worse. And that's probably a little bit like jarring for people, because they're like used to it getting and progressively getting better. But if you pay attention at the beginning of the film, his character says, if I'd have known how bad it was going to get, I would have stopped here or here, you know. It's so I thought that was an interesting thing, is you never get a resolution. You never get where they all come together for the best of the show or whatever. It just gets progressively worse. And I'm sure that could probably turn off some people, but I found that kind of interesting, because it's like, you know.
Well, to me, that's actually where it clicked for me, was how it does start off in that sort of path where he's like, oh, he's so anxious. He's like frantically like leaving. He's about to have a nervous breakdown. Yeah. And then at the end, when he sees that, oh, these people are clapping, they're laughing, they're loving in this. Just how he gets swept in that. That's what, to me, that's when the movie reached a new level, because I was like, I did not see that coming. And it is very funny how he just swoops in now. He's like, oh, this is my team. This is my great actors. They are such lovely people. Even though he's been basically cursing these people out since minute one. And I was like, this makes this character even more interesting, because I didn't like him the whole way through. But then I'm like, is he like a leech? Is this film talking about how some directors are like this, how they want to take credit for other people's success? I also started thinking this probably way too deeply. I was like, is this film saying how sometimes, like when you are creating art, you're putting your passion into it, you're trying your hardest, you think it's going to be a disaster, but people love it? Is that what he's trying to talk about? I don't know. This movie, it affected me in an interesting way, as in I was like, I think it's trying to say more than it is. And like I said, it's very effective in how it does take you for that ride. And it's definitely one that's worth checking out. And it's fun experience for that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, from the get-go. Like if you're not an actor, you've never been in plays, but you just want to watch a funny film that maybe you haven't seen in a long time, I think first of all, that's your way in. It's a hilarious film, hilarious premise, fantastic cast, and I think it works at that, from the get-go. Other than that, if you like a good disaster film and you just want to see can this actually get worse? Yeah, it can, and it does. And it gets progressively worse until they just win because people are just finding the hilarity of them falling apart. And I guess for a non-actor, it's probably even funnier because you're like, I don't know that this is not how it's supposed to be. Whereas I would be like freaking out. I'd be like, no, this is not cool. I'd be in tears. But I love the different personalities of these characters. I think the more I watch this film, the more in love I am with Selznick. I just think he is probably my favorite. And you would think it'd be Christopher Reeve because I'm such a big fan of him. But I love Selznick because he has no ego. He has no ego. He is just there. He's happy to be there. He may be late and he maybe forget what he's supposed to say, but he is there every single time. And I just love that about him. And plus it's Denham Elliott. I mean, come on. It's Denham Elliott, So
I love it when he's getting all impassioned about you smell that? That's the theater. It'll suck you in and you'll be addicted or something like that.
I don't know. I love this film for what it is. And for what it is it's just a classic screwball comedy. And I know there's 100 of them out there. But I think it's unique. This one's unique because of the setting. It's in the theater, but it's about a show. I mean, it's we've kind of gotten really deep about it, but it's kind of a deep concept a little bit. Peel back the curtain, so to speak. But I find it very relatable at times. But the main thing is, I think the comedy works. I think the actors that play these actors work really well together. I mean, John Ritter, God bless him. Carol Burnett. I mean, I don't think that there's a bad performance in this movie. Like, I don't think there's anybody in here where I'm like, oh man, if they were just out here, we'd be good. I can't think of. Can you?
No, I think they all work. I think they're great at playing bad actors. I mean, that takes a good actor to do that, I think.
And like I said, we're talking about classically trained actors. Christopher Reeve was a classically trained actor, so for them to kind of to throw that all out, I give them a lot of credit. And
I think that's a fun part about the movie too, is how it comments a lot on, I guess, the industries. Like, there's a lot of bad writing, but people they don't care. They think it's pretty entertaining. They think it's funny. Also, there's a lot of abusive directors. I think it was kind of getting to that a little bit. A lot of unprofessional actors. I don't know. I think there's a lot of different ways you can look at this movie. But I think it's just fun. Just go check it out if you can. That's the thing. Last little thing I want to talk about is it's hard to really find, and I'm hoping that's something that changes, because I know Disney has recently said that they do want to release more of their stuff out there, because they've just had this back catalog. I mean, Touchstone Pictures, which is what this was, that whole thing is just been frozen. They don't release those movies, and to me, if they're not on streaming, if they're not on a hard copy somewhere, then people are going to forget about this. And I don't think that should happen, because it is a very interesting film and it's got a great cast. It should be something to check out, and especially you theater nerds out there, you guys would love watching this. Come on. So that's why I'm glad we did this episode, just because it needs more attention and needs more people to go check it out.
And that's what we're all about here on the SuperCaZt. You're not just going to get superhero films or, classic comedy films. You're going to get these little lesser known films, because we want to keep them known. That's the point, is because a lot of these actors that are in this film have now passed, and it's really good work by everybody. Like I said, everybody is to be commended in this movie about a play. And especially if you have done theater like myself, it's easy to connect to. But I think even as like you said, if you just like classic comedy, it's easy to connect to, and that's what it's all about. Sometimes you just have to do that, and that's why we wanted to talk about this film. So yeah, tell your friends. You guys go check it out. Try to find a copy of it, and Disney release it. Because this film needs to be celebrated, especially now that a lot of those actors have now passed on, and their performances are just really great. So I'm really glad we got to talk about this film.
On the next episode,
he's back in a new Bond.
For our next film, we're going to talk about James Bond film that it's not one of my favorites. It's one that last time we actually did a ranking, it was toward the bottom line. I've been wanting to try it out again, and I'm so glad that you recommended it.
Welcome to hell, Blofeld.
It's Diamonds Are Forever. We're going to see if this one's forever or if it's just forever terrible. Let's find out.
on the next episode.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it. And if you haven't, go on our Twitter at SuperCaZt with a Z and join us there and let us know what you'd like to hear. And of course, join us on our Facebook group at SuperCaZt with a Z and say hi to us there. So for my buddy Steve Z, I am the Super Posh. We'll see you guys next time on the SuperCaZt.